we'll lead off this morning, and the SEC men's tournament gets going tomorrow up in Nashville, and as rough of a ride as it's been, Alex, as rough of a ride as it's been, they actually have a pretty good little draw. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think they got about as best of a draw as they could with the SEC being what it is this year. I mean, you get an Arkansas team that you handled at home a few weeks ago, and obviously Arkansas kind of ended the season really well. And I think a loss for Arkansas to South Carolina tomorrow wouldn't knock them out of the tournament because I think right now they're in that last four buys section for Lenardi. Obviously, probably would make things a little uncomfortable for them on Sunday, but I think Arkansas kind of did what they needed to do to end the season. But from a South Carolina standpoint, I mean, then they kind of have nothing to lose going into this tournament. Just go and play and see what you can do. And after that Tennessee game, Lamont Paris mentioned on the radio with Derek Scott, they're talking about Arkansas matchup. And he's like, no, it should give our team a little bit of confidence knowing that we found a way, we controlled that game and found a way to beat them. So Arkansas, you have to imagine is going to be motivated in that game to get some revenge. But I think we'll see kind of what a John Calipari coach team does in the SEC tournament. You never knew what you were going to get when he was at Kentucky, but I think Arkansas is going to have something to prove. But South Carolina, I think the goal for them is just go see what you can do because there's really nothing to lose from their standpoint.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's and Coach is right about that. And Coach Cal, maybe he's got a little bit of a mental block, I think, against South Carolina. He's had a rough go of it against the Gamecocks over the years. It is a good draw, at least in if they can get through the first two rounds. Not so much as in the quarters if they get to Auburn, who will be waiting patiently for somebody to take them on. Auburn is potentially the number one overall seed in the tournament this year, but as it's been brought up oftentimes, and Mike has mentioned it, we've mentioned it a couple of times. You do wonder about these teams that are, look, if you're the number one overall seed, that's great, Alex. But at the end of the day, they're not dropping below one of the four number. They're going to be a number one seed. Period. The end. So, you wonder how much this tournament will mean to a team like Auburn. Florida, Tennessee. I'm looking at the top four seeds here. Florida, Tennessee, Alabama. They're all kind of. I think Florida's going to end up being the number one overall seed, but they're all kind of playing to be a number one seed in the dance, and Auburn's already got it. But first things first is the Hogs, and then maybe the Rebels. Gamecocks had success against both this year, beating Arkansas as you mentioned. And Alex, I haven't heard. I mean, I've heard a little bit from Coach Paris, but my understanding was, a couple of weeks ago, or I'd say maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago, when it was, look, any chance of getting into the tournament based on a regular season resume is totally out the window. And the focus for this group, I get it. The fans are all worried about NIL and what to do in the offseason. Yeah, that's fine. But the coaching staff has to worry about this team that they're coaching. And my understanding was, let's try to be playing our best basketball when we get into the tournament in March. Do you think they can make that argument?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you think about going into that Tennessee game, the Georgia game, Georgia's just playing, talking about the regular season. The Georgia game, Georgia's playing its best basketball right now, and South Carolina competed, but just didn't have quite enough. And then going to that Tennessee game, I think they can take some out of that Tennessee game because, we talked about a bunch on here about how South Carolina has struggled playing on the road. I mean, they had Tennessee tied up at halftime and played them all the way down to the stretch, and Tennessee just had, a little bit too much there in the second half to overcome. But I mean, I think you're seeing some. There's a few bright spots that they are. I mean, obviously, Collin Murray-Boyles is playing outstanding basketball right now, and obviously, you hope he's healthy because he was battling, I think, a little bit of that injury second half of that Tennessee game and didn't play in the last 5 minutes. So you hope he's healthy going into this game. But there are some bright spots South Carolina can build on, and again, just go into this tournament knowing there's nothing for you to lose going into this tournament, and just see what you can do because you mentioned there's a favorable draw. Or I say favorable. It's none of the SEC is going to be favorable this year, but you like the chances they have in those first few rounds, and that is an interesting point about some of these teams like Auburn and Florida, and maybe even like an Alabama who had these a one or at the very least a 2 seed locked up. What's their mentality going into these tournament games because they they've been through a grueling schedule just like every other SEC team. Do they kind of, the coaches obviously wouldn't come out and publicly say it, but, do they want to try to get some rest here in this tournament before, the big dance really starts?
All right, Arkansas healthier than when they played the Gamecocks. They had zero answers for Collin Murray-Boyles in that game. None. 35 points and 12 of 16 from the floor. He shot 11 of 12 from the free throw line. I would imagine that largely the game plan is to try to get him going early again and see if Arkansas has made any adjustments. But if they have, and you would imagine that that's probably been the general and central focus for the Razorbacks hoops program the last few days. If they have, and if they are just going to hunker down on him and say he's not going to beat us, who else can beat them for the Gamecocks?
I think Nick Pringle could play a factor in that. He played really well against Tennessee. He had 16 points and 14 rebounds. And I think in that Arkansas game, he had 18 points against Arkansas and 9 rebounds. So he could be one if they put the sole focus on Collin Murray-Boyles and not let him have that 30-plus game again. I mean, he could be one that could be a focal point and have a good game again. And I think he was playing really good basketball down the stretch too, especially kind of building off that Tennessee game. But then I think you just need the guards. We kind of continue to talk about the guards could step up, and because really when you look at it in that game against Arkansas, it was really Collin Murray-Boyles and Nick Pringle with 35 and 18, and they were the only two in double figures. I mean, Jordan Butler was with 9, but you had Jamari Thomas with 3, Zach Davis with 1. Morris Ugasuk with 6. So you're going to need the guards to step up. And, I mean, Arkansas's got some talented guards too. But, I mean, I have to, like you mentioned, I think you have to imagine they're going to do everything they can to not let Collin Murray-Boyles have that 30-plus game and single-handedly beat them. So I think you have to watch Nick Pringle to see, if he can build off that Tennessee game. And then they're just going to need some more production from those guards compared to what they did in the first matchup between these two.
Yeah, the 53 combined between Pringle and CMB against the Razorbacks equaled the total for the entire team for Arkansas in that ball game. So it does seem like they're going to have to, if they stop those guys, it's going to turn to the guards for South Carolina, and they just haven't exactly been consistent this year, I would say, to say the least. Let's talk about CMB for a second, because there is a chance that tomorrow is the last time we'll see Collin Murray-Boyles in a Gamecock uniform. We don't know that. I know last night in the VIP room, it was mentioned that, hey, look, this thing is legitimately up in the air as to whether he returns or not. But how much in the last month do you think his draft stock has improved?
I think it has improved a lot, just what he's done recently. I mean, he's playing incredible basketball, and I mean, you saw the respect the coaches in the league had really for him to name him a second team All-SEC performer. And I think when you looked at it, some of the mock drafts, kind of middle of the season, they still had him kind of in that 15-ish range somewhere in there. And I think the way he's played recently, he's only going to stick there or maybe even rise up. And I wouldn't be surprised to see an NBA team kind of towards the lottery area pick him just because of the potential. And I think obviously the talk around Collin Murray-Boyles is the perimeter shot, and you've seen some flashes of it this year, but it hasn't been consistent. And I think just some teams maybe just see the potential is there, and they'll bring him in and they'll work with him. But obviously, as you mentioned, the reporting that Whittles had in the VIP room, like, there is some discussion. We'll see. We'll kind of figure out. It may not get an answer to that, right at the end of the season. But we'll see, and that we'll see what happens. But I think his draft stock, with the way he's played recently, has just kind of continued to soar up.
Yeah, I mean, he was on a heater. Clearly, Tennessee, Rick Barnes, I mean, we're not going to let him get 15 shots off in this game, and they didn't. He only shot the basketball 7 times, and of the 7, 3 of them were from long range, so just 4 inside the 3-point line. Where do you think his game, though, has improved the most?
I think here towards maybe middle of the second part of the half is just his aggression. Lamont Paris and those guys talked about, when he gets the ball, he's a very unselfish player. He's always looking to pass, but I thought, this second half, he really kind of took it in his own hands and said, he just attacked the basket. And that's why you see the way he's playing right now. He's really fun to watch attack the rim, because he almost attacks the rim like a guard, at the speed of a guard, with the way he can kind of, move his body around to get an open shot around the layup. and it's just really impressive to watch him with the way he can attack the rim. But I think it's really his aggression now. This second half of the season where he's kind of just say, get me the ball around the elbow, the free throw line, I'm gonna take it, and he can finish really, around the rim with the best of them. I think that's really kind of where he's taking his game to the next level.
We'll see. 1 o'clock tip tomorrow against the Razorbacks. 12:30 airtime from Nashville. Our friend Derek Scott and the great judge Casey Manning will have the call. Could it be the last game of the season for the Gamecocks? We'll soon find out. Alex, we'll turn our attention to the gridiron, from the hardwood to the gridiron. Now, I want to follow up on a note that you put in the VIP room last night. I'm sure most have read it by now. If not, I would encourage everybody to go check it out. Monday nights are fun nights on the Big Spurt. You mentioned four-star in-state lineman Zion. Is it Giles or Gillies? We can't figure this out.
I believe it's Giles.
Giles. Okay, so I apologize to the Giles family. Four-star in-state offensive lineman Zion Giles. He is going to be announcing a decision in 10 days. Alex, what's the latest?
Yeah, so obviously he went to the Clemson big recruiting weekend this weekend, and he announced last weekend the plans to announce on March 21st. And I thought, just from my perspective, I thought South Carolina was in a good spot, and he ended up going to Clemson. And I think there was maybe potential some talk that Clemson made a move, and maybe he could push the commitment date back. But the latest that I have on it is I feel good about where South Carolina is, and I think where we stand right now, I think the commitment still is going to happen on March 21st, and I think South Carolina's put themselves in a really good spot here.
You and Hale have been pretty tight with the recruiting stuff lately. Obviously, JC and Tony and everybody they chip in a bunch as well. But it seems to me, I mean, it's March, and there have been years around here where Carolina, you see the names that come up, and you see the numbers that come up next to their name, their player rankings and all these things, and it gets you excited. But as time goes on, some of that tapers off. These guys, and Carolina was one of blank schools. This whole thing feels different right now. And I don't mean any disrespect to guys who aren't ranked as highly. That's not what I'm not trying to create a divide here. We all know that 2- and 3-star players come to South Carolina and do a pretty good job, but they've been going after a bunch of very high-end talent. And my understanding, Alex, they are right in the thick of it, if not leading for the majority of those guys. And some of those leads are by a pretty significant margin. What can you add to that?
Yeah, they've been obviously building this class for a long time now, and you think about some of the names that you hear about a lot in this class with South Carolina. You think about Darius Gray, the offensive lineman from Virginia, who's kind of a borderline 5-star guy. Like, I think South Carolina's put themselves in a really good spot there. And it kind of with Darius Gray and really a lot of these guys, that it seems that South Carolina may have a lead on. They're obviously going to have to get to the finish line with them, just because a lot of these guys are going to be taking a lot of different visits. But, I mean, you're right. South Carolina's put themselves in a really good spot with a lot of these guys. I mean, Rodney Dunham, the edge out of North Carolina, released a top 5 the other day, and South Carolina's in it. And I think with him, you kind of think about South Carolina and Tennessee being the 2 schools of them, and maybe Duke could watch out for Duke as well, because we saw what Duke did last year with Bryce Davis, who was an edge out of that, kind of that area up there in North Carolina. But I mean, it's really deep. You can see it on both sides of the ball. I mean, you mentioned Darius Gray, Aiden Harris, a defensive lineman from Weddington. South Carolina's put themselves in a decent spot there. Got some of the in-state guys too. Like, you think about, Tamarian Watkins out of Northwestern. He's a really good player, and I think he could be one that continue to rise in rankings, because he's getting offers from just about everybody. Georgia and Texas A&M have offered him, but he's one that I think, again, South Carolina's in a good spot with. And then they're still battling for some guys. I think Carson Baker out of Langston Hughes. I mean, he's a running back. That's the spot that South Carolina needs to add, maybe at least one to that spot for what they're going to lose after this upcoming season. But they're battling for him. So there's a lot of momentum for South Carolina on the recruiting trail right now, and really on both sides of the ball, they've put themselves in a good spot for a lot of really high end prospects.
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable. Winning helps. When you win games, people certainly want to be a part of it. But they seem to have the magic potion right now. We'll obviously continue to follow a bunch of this, and then we'll shifting over to the team that's actually here. They are set to go in not 8 days. 8 days. We just got that. I think we just got an email last night from Steve, didn't we, Alex?
Yeah.
Didn't I see that come through? Yeah. Okay. As we get a little bit closer, and obviously we'll be able to do this again next week. What are some of your top storylines?
Some of the position battles, I think that maybe we find out about spring practice what they're going to look like come fall, but maybe they roll into spring or preseason camp. I think some of the positions you're going to think about there are wide receiver, starting on offense, wide receiver. Obviously they got some returning guys. Think about Nick Harbor, Mazio Bennett, Jared Brown, and Dre Jacobs. I mean, that's I think a solid 4 players to return, but I think really a lot of the odds are going to be on the true freshmen, the 5 true freshman wide receivers that are on campus right now. There's a lot of talk about those guys, and how well they performed, but obviously they're going to have to, take that up a level to be, someone they rely on. And because it's never easy for a freshman to play in the SEC, but I think those guys have really made, turn some heads early on. And I think, once we get to the spring portal window, maybe they look to the portal to see if they can get one more. But that's one spot. The interior of the offensive line, obviously having to replace those Kamar Bell, Vershawn Lee, and Torricelli Simpkins. I mean, that's 3 guys on the interior you got to replace, but they got a lot of different options that they can go with. There's either with be it the transfer guys like Rodney Newsom or Nick Sharp, or Boaz Stanley, who seems like maybe has the inside track for the center position. But they also got some guys returning there at some of the young guys. Truvon Ball, who was a freshman All-American by some outlets, and can he step up and rise up into that guard position? Can Marquis Anderson rise up to that spot as well? I mean, Tree Bobbele, what do they do with him? Do they kind of move him into the interior? So I think interior offensive line is really going to be kind of fascinating to watch to see, what kind of lineups we see while we're out there at practice on the offensive line. And then really interior defensive line, that defensive tackle, they lost a lot, we all know, but there's some guys that could really, Gabriel Brownlow-Dinty's a guy I'm really excited to watch. And I think he's got a lot of potential coming from Texas A&M, and Devontae Miles as well. I think it's also turned some attention to. I think he's one that, maybe when you saw it, like he could be a really good depth piece, but I think he's really kind of turned it on since he's gotten on campus as well. So, just a few different spots that just going to be some position battles. What do they do with Jalen Kilgore at that nickel spot? Do they keep him at that nickel spot, or do they move him back to safety, kind of where he started when he got to South Carolina? It's just, there's a lot of different things in that they can go with at all these different positions, but they've really kind of built a lot of depth at each of these positions where there's a lot of different quality options.
As far as the transfers, who did you get to meet with last week?
Saw Air Nolan.
Yeah, stop there. Let's just stop there.
Yeah.
I thought that you had a chance to meet with Nolan.
Yeah.
Give us your takeaways from him. Just play, demeanor, all the things. What did he have to say?
I thought one of the more impressive things he talked about was the competition factor. Obviously, being a guy who's at Ohio State, was behind a guy like Will Howard, who helped Ohio State win the national championship, and comes to South Carolina where Lenore Sellers is going to be the guy in 2025. And you look at it, and he could have maybe just stayed at Ohio State, but he wanted to come to South Carolina. He liked the Mike Shula, or liked what he saw from Mike Shula, but he's mentioned he's not scared of the competition. I think he feels it's going to help make him better and help working with a guy like the North. I think he's really excited to do that. And I thought that was just really, telling, for his attitude and his perspective, that he's not scared of the competition. He's not scared to learn from guys in the rest of the quarterback room.
Yeah, I think this kid's really good.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't. I'm saying this, as a positive for him, not as a negative for Lenore's. I think this gap is a little bit closer than people think it is. Lenore Sellers is the starting quarterback in South Carolina. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But God forbid, and hopefully it's just in mop-up duty, he has to go in the game. That I think people, from what I've been told, are going to be pretty impressed with what they see out of this kid. He's a big kid too.
Yeah, and he's put on a little bit of weight too from where he was listed at Ohio State's official roster to where he's now. He looks a little bit bigger and stronger, and I think it's going to be interesting to see. Like, maybe do they have a few packages for him? Because you saw that with Robbie Ashford early on, they had a few packages with him. Do they do that with Aaron Nolan? I think that's really intriguing because he kind of mentioned when we were talking to him that he's kind of asked about his best attributes, and I think he mentioned he has sneaky athleticism, and I think that could be something that'd be really kind of tough for teams to account for when but and obviously with Norris being the guy, but it could be interesting. Maybe you see some of that as well. But he's a fascinating player to watch this spring because I think he's now got another year where obviously he's pushing Lenoris to continue to work him, and I think that's another option of this where Lenoris is going to have a guy like Air Nolan really pushing him, and that's only Shane Beamer and the rest of that coaching staff always mentions how competition, that's all they want is competition, and they're going to have it in that quarterback room, and with Lenoris being the guy, but he's going to have Air Nolan, continue to work and help improve each other.
Final one, Alex, and we'll get you out of here. I think we'll probably have to look at the schedule next week. It's Pro Day next Tuesday. 25 players will be out on the field working out. I know you'll be covering that. This is going to be, in my opinion, the most anticipated Pro Day in Carolina football history. They could smash the record for draft picks this year, and this is really kind of the final look at the group before the NFL draft comes calling next month. But going into last season, there was a ton of conversation around, Nick Harbor. Oh, it's his turn. It's his time. And so I was very apprehensive to hop on that train based on what I had heard and just based on, understanding how things develop for some players. But personally, I thought as the season went along, Nick Harbor would get more and more and more comfortable, and I think he did.
Mm-hmm.
I think he finished the year and he looked like a wide receiver. To be quite frank, he looked like someone trying to play wide receiver prior to that. I think that this is his. I think it's his turn. He's going to hear. This whole team is going to hear all this stuff. They've already started hearing it. It's being written about, regionally, statewide, nationally. What to do with this wide receiver group. They need to go back to the portal. They need to do this. They need to do that. Number one, I think he's going to take that personal. And number two, you're giving this kid 8 months to continue to round himself into form at that position. If I was asked today, quite frankly, who are you, aside from the quarterback, who are you the most excited to see on offense? It's a no-brainer. It is Nick Harbor. I think he's got a chance to have a very, very special year.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, you mentioned it. You really start to see middle to late into the season, you start to see the light come on for him at wide receiver. And I think that's a credit to his work ethic, obviously, because they talked about how hard he worked to continue to improve. But I think Mike Fury did an awesome job helping him continue to develop. But I think what that did now, or for him, was I think that gave him the confidence to show that he can do it. And so now you see him, with sole focus on football, not running indoor track. I think that's going to be huge for his development to have that whole spring where he can build on what he did toward the end of the season. And we know all the physical attributes that he has. I mean, he's fast. I mean, he's one of the. I mean, obviously Bruce Feldman has him as the number one freak in back-to-back years. And I mean, we know what he can do from that standpoint. But now it's just having that light continue to turn on at wide receiver. And I think you're starting to see that. And obviously, we talked about just a minute ago with, that wide receiver spot. They need somebody to step up. And, I mean, he's one of those that he's, I think maybe number one on that list who absolutely can and be a number one type of guy if he continues to develop.
Well, it's getting fun. Spring ball right around the corner. You got a lot to cover here.
Yeah.
Over the next few weeks, Alex. A busy time of the year. Always appreciate you, my man. Everybody, make sure that they head to thebigspur.com. You can read more of Alex's work. The pride of Hampton County, South Carolina. See you next week, dude. We'll work on we'll figure out next week. I know you'll be in Williams-Brice when we're on the air next Tuesday, so we'll figure something out.
Sounds good. See y'all next week.
Thanks, brother. There you go. Alex Jones with thebigspur.com.